You're listening to the Influential Conversations podcast with the property management coach and industry influence of the year, Kirk, Stafford, and guests. Welcome again to another episode of Influential Conversations. My name is Kirk Stafford. I am the property management coach, and joining me today is the always effervescent Megan Taylor from Longview Property in Glen Waverley, Mount Waverley, eastern suburbs of Melbourne, but with a business that, what do you say, about 4,000 to 4,500 properties under management, spans pretty much the entire Melbourne metro area and beyond. Megan, thank you so much for joining us. You're the head of property partnerships at Longview. I'm really, really deeply grateful for you giving up your afternoon. Welcome. And what the hell are you doing in this industry?
Well, I love it, to be honest with you, Kirk. It's something that my dad was a real estate agent for a very long time. He was in sales. Mm-hmm. And it was something that my mum suggested I try when I was made redundant from from a job that I was in. I used to work at Optus, and Mum said, just, why don't you try real estate? And I just said to Mum, I don't want to work 7 days a week. She said, I think you'd enjoy it. I think you should give it a shot. Yep. And of course, Mum was right, and I just fell in love with it in the first week. So I just really enjoyed meeting lots of different people. I really enjoyed going through different properties, and it just fit like a perfectly sized glove from the first day that I started it. So I loved it.
Fantastic. So it wasn't, look, and I think a lot of people, I haven't met anyone yet in this series of podcasts that has said, oh no, I've been wanting to do this since I was in high school. I don't think anybody saw it as a career choice while they were going through school. In fact, I don't even think it was talked about. Property management was not something that people talked about as a career choice. I think most of us came to it a little bit less intentionally. I know that I'm a refugee from sales. I did 6 or 7 years selling properties, and then realised that I was far better as a property manager than I was as a salesperson. What was your career path? Did you start in sales, or was it straight into PM? Where did you actually start the career? I know you said you started with your dad.
Well, no, I actually didn't start with my dad because I wanted to try something new and not work straight with my dad, because I was only 20 when I started. So I got a job as a receptionist, and that was lots of fun, actually. And that was back before we had like Google Maps and everything. So people would come into the office and ask where properties were. So you got out the Melways. Melways. I know. Highlight where they needed to go. So that was really good fun, actually. But I was only in reception for about 6 months and went into an assistant property manager role. Again, that was another 6-month role. And then I went straight into a portfolio of about 250 properties that looked after the north of Melbourne. So Brunswick, Preston, Northcote, all those wonderful areas. So
okay. Yeah. The areas now that have really the hipster belt.
And it wasn't back then.
I know. Yeah. I cut my teeth in Frankston. And again, that's another area that's changed. I think we've found that over time that with the evolution of our society, I guess the Melbourne Metro is a maturing area. The areas that were originally the low budget areas are certainly not those now, and the personality is the same. But gee, I tell you what, like you said, we meet all types in this industry, don't we?
Oh God, but that's the best fun about it. I mean, some of my most fun stories were from the people that I got to meet along the way. Great relationships with tradies. It was really good fun years, and I think it was definitely easier back then. Just everything was more simple, and it was definitely easier back then than what it is today. That's for sure. Yeah.
Look, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you mentioned the Melways before, the old street directories. So I thought, gee, there's a blast.
Can you explain what that is to the young people?
I think we need to. It was a hard copy version of Google Maps, and it was updated annually.
Oh my God, the good days.
Yeah, that's right. But it was. Well, that's the whole thing. Mobile phones were really only just becoming a thing then. I remember. I think I got my first mobile phone in the early 90s, and it was car mounted. Oh, and yes. It was horrendously expensive to make a call on. So you didn't make calls on it. And the other thing is nobody would call you because it was just as expensive from a landline to call a mobile. Now, you're on plans and nothing else matters. But our technology now, I think far from making our lives easier, it's actually created other levels of expectation.
100%.
I mean, you said before, and I was the same as you. I think I managed about 320 properties end to end before I got an assistant.
Yeah.
And that was people just, that's okay, that's fine. No, it's no big deal. But in those days also we had regulated commissions. So I can go back before 1997.
Right. Oh, God, I don't remember that. But I remember we were but it was so different because you took a couple of photos for a condition report.
Mm-hmm.
Routine inspection was written, like half the time it was actually handwritten. If you typed it up, that was very fancy.
That was special clients. Yeah.
Yeah. It was so different back then. When I think back on it now, some of the stuff that happened, like if that was to happen today, it would be VCAT, it would be compensation. It was, back then I was like, oh, okay, no worries. I would,
That's right. Those are the days when we used to hand out keys for a $20 or a $50 key deposit.
We did.
Remember
that?
Yeah.
Until the other day. Yeah.
Yeah. I was one of the first that started the personal inspections because I thought, well, there's a risk there. And what I was doing then was open for inspections. So that was the very, very start of it.
Gosh. See, I really enjoyed open for inspections because I love talking with people. And I felt that I could, sell the property better when I actually attended. And so it definitely was something that I enjoyed doing on my Saturdays during the open runs was fun, really.
Yeah.
So I get that. Yeah. But it's good that you did that because as it turns out, it was a security risk. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And look, I think we're very fortunate that nothing bad that we know of happened. But then you just don't know because people could have gone to Bunnings, got a key cut for $2 each and gone in and rolled the place or just moved in.
And that was the thing, like it's surprising it didn't happen more. There was a lot of weird, dodgy stuff that did happen back those days. But, it's surprising that it didn't actually happen more because it was certainly the opportunity for it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember the software programs we had back then were just archaic compared to what they were now, what they are now, and we had none of the support that we have in terms of additional platforms. But I'm interested, just tell me the Longview model. I mean, you are very, very heavily based with technology from what I understand. Running 4,500 properties, you've got to be, and you've got to be at the front end of it. I know Evan is really, really strong in that. But what does the model actually look like that from maybe say an outsider's point of view, someone who's a PM looking at it from a distance? What would they see?
I think the way that we have our program, the way that we've got our property management team set up is it's very much, I guess, aspirational, where you can see your career through Longview. Mm-hmm. So, from someone who perhaps, even if it was someone who's never been in property management, they can 100% start their career here at Longview. And then through the steps that we have in place with our team setup, can really move into various roles within property management, but then finish up as a team leader, in the future as well. So our focus was created, I guess where Longview was created was because Evan, in his personal experience, found there was a lack of detailed analysis of how his portfolio was going. And he found that there was, CMA done, but not much else was really considered in the management of a property. So he, wasn't a property manager at all, but decided to consult those who were well respected within the industry and said, well, how do you do it and how can we do it better? And yes, technology is definitely a backbone of what we have here. We've been paperless for forever. So when everyone got sent home during COVID, that wasn't a problem for us because that was just, another day. Not the COVID stuff, but certainly going paperless was not a problem.
That's right. When you're already accustomed to it, working remote's not an issue. Yeah.
It wasn't at all. We were able to do it very quickly. But I think for us, it's very much a big focus on data analytics and how you look at the data. So, sometimes people have access to one or two different platforms to look at the market, what's leasing, how quickly it's leasing. We've got access to 4 or 5, and we've also created our own that analyzes the market and gives people some really great insights as to how their property is performing. We look at capital annualized growth rates. We look at a lot of these different things. So it's more the analysis on how a property is going and try to really get into the detail, which is where we're a little bit different. And that's really just for those investor clients that love all of that detail and want a different point of view as to how, and to see the evidence base as to why we're making certain recommendations as to how their portfolio is going. With the property management side of things, we just really try and have as much support as possible so that our property managers can focus on client service, and we really try and make our client service the same: great experience for tenants and great experience for landlords.
Yeah.
And we measure that again with data. We do very regular NPS surveys on our clients just to make sure that we don't have a discrepancy between our tenant and our landlord NPS. We really want everyone to feel that they're getting a great level of service and it's a very respectful relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's right. It's something that I think anyone who's been in the industry for some time will be very aware of, and that is that you can't differentiate between service deliveries. The landlord and the tenant experience have to be pretty much in balance with each other because they're both parts of the equation. They're not siloed from each other. And I use that term quite a bit because you can't have one without the other. You can't have a landlord without a tenant. The other side of that is, particularly in the current light, you can't have a tenant without a landlord. So you've got to be really, really mindful that both are getting a good experience. And just so that, and I think most people probably would, but anyone who's listening who doesn't understand what an NPS is, it's a Net Promoter Score, and it's basically a survey tool, so you can actually track how well you are doing with your service delivery. That's probably the easiest and the simplest way. Anybody who wants to look at it, if you just Google Net Promoter Score, you'll be able to find a whole lot of information about them as well. And I tune into a lot of Evan's stuff, and I read a lot of his papers and the stuff that he put out. It was only about a month and a half or 2 months ago with PEXA, I think, was a really, really insightful.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. We were a huge part of that service, that research into the experience for property managers, but also for tenants and landlords, and why, ultimately they came to the conclusion that the system isn't a system that works well. And that's where I think a lot of property managers, they probably know that, but can't really see why the system doesn't work as well as it should, and why we're offering the meat in the sandwich of a frustrated sandwich. So from both sides.
It is a frustration sandwich, isn't it? And we're really caught right in the middle of it. And it's because we're trying to balance out, and it's a very simplistic way of looking at it, we're trying to balance out two competing sets of wants and needs, because both sides will have a different view of the way that something should be handled, whatever it is, particularly when it comes to things like maintenance, can be security of the property as well in terms of the length of the lease and those sorts of things. So we try to sort of to get both right, and it's always a bit of a high wire act because
And I think that's the hard thing is when you've done this job, especially for such a long time, you forget to go into the detail as to how you've come to your recommendation with clients. And that's what I always try and explain to the team is when you're talking to your clients, you need to explain how you got to this recommendation or why you're telling them this is what we need to do. Because even though you can see 15 steps ahead of anybody else, you need to be able to explain why that is. And I think that's where a lot of property managers, they forget that they've got all of this amazing knowledge and experience, but they forget to share those steps with their clients. And that can actually avoid a lot of that frustration if you just take some time to say, this is the situation. This is how I've dealt with it in the past. This is how I've also badly dealt with it in the past. And this is how I can help you avoid this. But people are so wanting to quickly get things sorted and dealt with, they don't make time to explain the reasons why they're recommending something. And then as a result, it actually takes 3 times as long and they're dealing with frustrated people. It is it's really tricky.
Because we're basically giving them the solution without explaining the steps beforehand. In a session that I run a few times now to do with negotiation and also managing difficult conversations, I actually step them through the process of say, well, this is what's happened, this is what we've done, this is why we've done it, and this is the effect that it's had on you. And I've got a little formula that I use with that. But it's interesting that if you take that extra minute and a half or maybe 2 minutes on the phone or a little bit more information in an email, which I really prefer to be on the phone, but if you just use that little bit more time and care and attention to step them through the why, the what suddenly isn't so important because you've actually given them you've actually given them the solution you want for them to give back to you.
Absolutely. And it's so, getting on the phone as much as you can is such so important. And it's really hard because a lot of people these days are just wanting the answer so quickly. And so it's text, it's email. But again, I often find that you're then 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 emails down, which probably could have been a 2-minute conversation. And
that's right.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. Like, just pick up the phone.
Yeah, about that. Let's not have cool reluctance around this because it's not a good thing. But it is because we almost end up in an email debate rather than, as you said, could go for 7 or 8 emails rather than a 2 or 3 minute conversation, and it's done. It's dealt with. You've got the solution, and then you can confirm it by email. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be that you go back and forth and back and forth. Okay, yes, some people don't want to do that, and that's their style. So you've got to lay it out. You almost need a template for that sort of conversation. So you do the same thing. You say, this is the occurrence, this is what we've done, this is why we've done it, and this is the effect for you, so that it's all sort of really laid out. But it's getting it to that point where you get the agreement. But it's one of those things, I think, that also we tend to be very busy in our lives, and we say, no, I haven't got time. I know it's the property manager, or that's just going to cost me money. And that's the thing. I got taught that really early on because I picked up the phone and rang a client. This is in the days pre-email, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. You do remember? Oh, phew, good. Okay, I want the only one. But I remember, phone to a client, and he had 3 properties, and he said, "Okay, Kirk, hello, Kirk. How much is it this time?" And I thought, well, that's interesting because that means that every conversation I've had with this guy has been a money conversation. Now they can avoid those money conversations by just saying, I only want to be communicated with by email.
Yeah.
But there are times that we do need to pick up the phone. And I've got a rule that I use in my difficult conversations where I just say, look, after this many messages, it's no longer a text or an email. It's a phone call, and it's got to be that way to resolve. It's obviously gone too far, and you just need to nip it in the bud because it takes you 3 to 4 to 5 times longer to compose an email than to have a phone call.
I think there's also an element of, especially people who, perhaps haven't been in property management that long, but are concerned that they won't know the answer, or are concerned that they might say the wrong thing and then be held accountable. But again, that's okay. If you get it wrong, you find out you're wrong, you pick up the phone again. Hey, I've just actually realized I was wrong. And you explain it again. I think there's such a fear of giving the wrong information that people would send an email because that feels safer. Whereas I think a conversation there's so much more relatability. And if you do make a mistake, you can so easily reverse it. But right. I was, years and years ago, I always tell this story to my team about one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was over an email. And a tenant had emailed me to say, hi, Megan, my tap's broken. Can you get it fixed? Blah, 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 blah. And at the end of it, a very quick one sentence that just said, I won't be renewing my lease at the end of the year. No problem. So I got the whole see what's going to happen. And so I got the tap fixed, no problem. I wrote him an email 3 months later. Hi, your lease is coming up for renewal. Would you like to renew your lease? He didn't write back. And a month later, hi, I haven't heard from you. Another email. Again, no reply. Day of lease expires, comes into the office, drops off his keys. And I said to him, you haven't given me notice. He goes, I did. I gave it to you 6 months ago. And when I was talking to my dad, real estate agent at the time, and I told him, I said, this tenant, blah, 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 blah. He goes, okay, man, how many times did you pick up the phone and ask him why he didn't respond to your emails? And I went, I didn't, Dad.
I didn't?
He goes, maybe you should have picked up the phone. And it's so true. And it was so simple because if I'd called up that tenant and said, how come you haven't responded to my email? He would have said, I've already given you notice.
Yeah, and I told you months ago. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because, and I was taught this by a guy called Tony Warren, who was the property management guru of Melbourne in the 80s and the 90s. And Tony's still around. And Tony, if you do hear this, I hope you're well. I know you've had some health struggles, but I hope you're coming through them. But he related a very similar story about tuning into conversations because you could have that same conversation that you've just had by email, or that first email about the tap, and then during that, your tenant says, "Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be renewing the lease. I'm going to shift." But if you're not paying attention to the conversation, if you're sort of managing other emails, or you're tuning into something else and not giving that your full attention, you might miss that again. So you need to be in where you are. You need to be present in whatever the conversation is. There's no point sort of looking around. And I make a habit now of turning my emails off during the day if I'm working on something. If I'm sort of writing a thought piece, or I'm writing a session piece or something along those lines, I'll switch off Outlook so that I'm not having that constant reminder coming up. And it's something that I do with my time management stuff when I'm talking to people, is turn it off. You don't need to be on your inbox all day. You don't need to be on your phone all day.
Just be present and listen. It saves so much more time. And it's one of those things, like with my team, we used to do what's called an hour of power. And I used to say, okay, turn off all your notifications, turn off everything. This is all you're going to do. Just focus on that task, and you'll see how much more effective you can be. And, I used to try and multitask all the time, and all I did was a whole bunch of tasks badly. Really.
Yep, that's right. And I've heard that used as a quote too. Multitasking is the way that you do that. Yeah. You do a whole lot of stuff at the one time, all very badly.
Yes, absolutely. So no, it's definitely much more effective to do things that way. And just to give someone your time. You can tell when someone is distracted or not when they're having a conversation with you. And nothing worse than having a conversation with a person and all you can hear is click, 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 click in the background. I think those silent keyboards are death. They should not be invented. They should keep people from typing on their computers. So, yeah. Well,
yeah, because I think that, and I remember it's appropriate, actually, given that we're in grand final week. I remember there was a quote from a guy called Jack Dyer, who was a coach in the 90s. I think he played for Richmond. He was the captain coach of Richmond in the 50s. And his quote was, "Be where the ball is."
Yeah.
So, it's that whole thing of wherever you are, be there. It's not just sort of give it lip service. Be part of that activity, whatever it is, whether it's conversation, whether you're doing tasks or whatever it is. Concentrate on that one thing. Don't get distracted from it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Hey, what have you? This is probably going to sound a funny question. What have you found your challenges? I know you said you love people, and that's the really good part of the job. I'm guessing I know the answer to the question here. What are your challenges? What have you found has particularly challenged you over the last few years?
I think for me, what's been the biggest? It's hard to put it down. I think the biggest challenges have been, it sounds silly, but I think a lot of the legislative changes that have come in have actually really gotten in the way of creating great relationships with people. Yep. I feel like, this whole box ticking that is happening has really taken away from the relationships that I used to have with my clients when I was doing the day-to-day property management. And now it's all about, everyone is so scared of making a mistake, and the legality of everything that we're doing is making this such a cold transactional relationship. When I used to, with property management, I used to sit in the front window. My clients would walk past, we'd wave, I used to help give them advice as to what good schools were to go to. I was part of helping my clients, with their children and their families and where to live and what they needed. And now it's making sure, oh God, I haven't completed the disclosure statement. Oh, I don't want to complete the disclosure statement because what if I get that wrong? And it's it's become, everything is being taken away from that relationship that we used to have with our clients. And I understand the purpose behind the changes. And you actually said this once, and it sits so beautifully in my head. So thank you for this, Kirk. You said, the residential rental provider, the change of that name is to remind the owner that they are providing residential home for a person. And that is so true. And I never thought about it that way before. So thank you for that. But but I think it's
I think I've said it. I'll claim it.
But it was so true, because it made me remember that's exactly what they're doing. But it's all the other things that have come in the way. I think I know that they're important, but I feel like they've taken away from what used to be a service providing industry. So now it's become so litigious that it's taken away the humanity of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I actually I'd agree with that. We've lost that humanity because of the intense regulatory environment that we're in now. I mean, look, I'm not going to get political about it because I think we've all got a particular view on it. But if it had just been let to run its course, I think it probably would have had a different outcome. In a lot of cases, it would have been completely different, and we wouldn't be in this almost combative environment anymore.
No, and I think that's where it is. I mean, it's so interesting with regards to how, I mean, I remember when I took over a portfolio, it was in Elwood, and God, that learning curve for me was like this. It was straight up. As soon as a tenant didn't have a working hot plate, I want compensation. I was like, oh God, wait, what for? You've got 3 other ones. But it just became this whole response, cause, effect, and it was, I remember it was such a shock to the system that then I became really afraid. It became fear. Oh my God, I can't get it fixed in time. They're going to ask for compensation. Then I have to explain to the owner, and then the owner's going to blame me, and then the tenant's going to hate me. And
that's right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's a real shame that that's what it's come. But I still do try, and every time there is, there's always a legal answer to everything that happens. But I always try and at least have a conversation with the person first, and come to a solution or an answer as humans, rather than trying to constantly say that's what the law says, that's what the legislation says.
That's right. Yep, absolutely agree with you. I remember and because I'm not on the tools at the moment, I remember years ago I'd be saying to both the landlord and the tenant when I onboarded them, here's a copy of the Residential Tenancies Act. You see how thick it is. Here's your lease. Here's the condition report. Here's remember the little red book, the Statement of Rights and Duties we used to have to hand out from Consumer Affairs. I used to turn around and say, you can stick all those in the bottom drawer in the kitchen and leave them there until you move out, if we all do 2 things, and that's play fair and use some common sense, because we're all in this together. I used to use that that was my induction. That was my onboarding particularly with tenants. Because I wanted them to come to me if there was ever going to be an issue, rather than have hand-to-hand combat about it. I'd prefer to have a conversation.
Couldn't agree more. And that's such a good idea, because I think that's great to do that in the induction as well, just to really say to people, we're just in this, I'm a human being, you're a human being, let's try and work this out together. And I think that's a great way to start off that relationship, because it just feels so, that's what, computer says no. It's the answer for so many things these days. And
that's right. Yeah,
I know.
Exactly.
I feel like such an old lady, though, with me talking to you, going, just pick up the phone and forget just do this. Remember the good old days.
Yeah, but Megan, no, I think we both have that same ethos, that the way to solve the problem is to have a conversation, not to engage in sort of breach notices and compensation claims and what have you. It's to actually have a conversation and say, okay, well, what's our path through this? How do we get a resolution that suits all sides? That's not being an old man or an old woman. That's just being pragmatic, and it's being human, really, because at the end of the day, we are humans. We're social creatures. We thrive on interaction. We need human contact, and human contact isn't provided by Gmail or Outlook.
Absolutely. And if anything, it can really, how a person is feeling, and we all know this, how a person is feeling can directly impact the way that they interpret your email. And every time, I used to make it a rule, and I still do, that as soon as I'm sure that someone has misinterpreted an email of mine, I pick up the phone straight away and have a conversation. Because I've so many times a person has come back to me saying, you don't need to be condescending or anything. I'm like, I'm not. I'm just trying to explain the steps. But I then pick up the phone and say, I just want you to know I'm not being condescending. I'm really just trying to explain things to you. And they go, oh, okay. Well, everyone, it all works out fine.
But everybody takes a breath all of a sudden. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this is the whole thing. I still have it from time to time now. And I know that I get it a lot from property managers when they ring me for advice. They say, I've just had this really bad email back from a landlord or a tenant saying, well, I didn't like the tone in your email. I go, well, emails don't have a tone. They're a bunch of dots on a screen, really. When it's all said and done, that's all they are. They don't have tone of voice. They don't have high and low. There's no pitch. There's no modulation. It's just words.
But you can spend so much time trying to create tone in an email as well. You know, hello, hope your day's going well. You know, now there's emojis. I mean,
yeah. Yep.
I love it. But yes,
And
but
there is that emoji.
I know. I never know. I feel like I overuse the smiley emoji sometimes. But
I think, look, I think we all do, because we're trying to instill that, as you said, that tone of voice, and it's just really, it's not something that's that easy, because again, you know, somebody will look at that and go, you're just trying to be sly about this, or, you know, I'm not really in that good a mood and I really don't want to read your email, so I'm going to read it. And it's always read with their frame of mind, not the frame of mind that we were in when we sent it.
Absolutely. And I think it's
very,
so hard
very difficult to get through.
Property managers get such a hard rap sometimes. I mean, you tell anyone I'm in property management, oh, that's a tough job. No, it's not, actually. I mean, yes, it can have challenges, but tell me a job that doesn't have challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I always try and explain to people all the positives that are in this job and how many, you know, woohoo moments you get in a day. I mean, it's a great job, and I would never do anything else ever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's just, I love it so much, and I think it just gets a bad rap.
It does, but then it gets a bad rap because, you know, it's always seen as being this confrontational, combative role. We're always seen that we're on the landlord's side, which is a hangover from feudal days when you use the term landlord. And again, you know, you go back to things like residential rental provider, and I understand why they wanted to try and get away from that landlord tag, because they want to try to diffuse, and it's my sort of theorising about, they want to diffuse that combative relationship of the landlord being the one who sort of trots through the fields on his big wide horse looking down on all the pleb tenants. And we've got to get away from that as a message. It's
so true. But do you know what's really funny? That as soon as you call a landlord to talk to them about something, they then think you're on the tenant side. So everyone thinks you're on their side, which actually you are. You're the person trying to explain each person's point of view to come to an agreement in the middle. So you actually are on everybody's side. But, you know, who's on the property manager's side? That's what I want to
know. Well, we're the ones buttering that frustration sandwich, you see.
Yes. Very leathered.
And then putting ourselves in there as the filling. Yeah, that's terrific. Well done. How do we get there? So tell me, and look, I'm sort of starting to run up out of a bit of time here, but when you find yourself getting challenged internally, where do you go? What do you do to overcome that? Because, and we all go through it. We all get spots in our working lives which aren't great, where we've had a bad situation occur, or we're just not feeling great. What do you do to pull yourself out of that, to try to get some recovery time?
A few things. I'm very lucky that I have a beautiful husband and family around me that I can talk to. I do boxing, which is awesome for stress relief. Highly recommend it for anybody. And I try and get away, but sometimes I just need to remind myself of why I'm in this. And I will listen to podcasts and people in property management to remind myself of why I love this job. And always just I need to challenge myself. I can't be static. I need to find new ways of trying to delight and excite people about what we're doing in property management. So I'll listen to or read some great books. But generally for me, it's when I feel, and, you know, this has happened recently, Kirk, that I feel myself plateauing. I feel myself not getting excited, that I'll take a couple of days off work because I know it's important that I do that, and I'll escape with my family and read some books that are, you know, escapey books, and it just helps reset me, and that's really important. So, because boxing only does so much, and sometimes you just need to rest, and I find that I'm taking more and more, a day or two off here and there, and that just helps re-energize me. So. Yeah,
and I don't think people can, any of us can underestimate the power of that break. And I try to do the same thing and get away pretty frequently, even if it's just a weekend, just to nick off down the coast or out in the country or whatever. It's important that you have those circuit breakers. So that's a really good tip for our listeners if they're listening in. And it really doesn't even have to be that. It can just be sitting at home without the phone on.
Yeah, that is such an important thing. Again, you know, during all those lockdowns when everything on the news was doom and gloom, we used to turn the TV off, put on some music and just dance around the house. And that is, if you can feel turn off all the negative people on your social media, just block them. They don't want to know. Turn off all the negative Nancys. Don't watch the news or anything like that. You can really control what you surround yourself with. And I really try and surround all of my TikTok. My daughter says my TikTok is old lady TikTok, but it's cooking. It's cooking and it's Grey's Anatomy. That's my entire TikTok, and that's fine for me. That's my escape. So there we go. But
I don't even have TikTok.
Oh, I did it. I've got to be up with the times.
Oh yeah, hang on for it. Listen, I've got Instagram, I've got Facebook, I've got 2 Facebook accounts. I've got the business and the personal one. I've got LinkedIn, I've got WhatsApp. I'm just going, my head's going to explode. And that's just, then I'm looking, and I'm trying to get my head around AI, and I'm thinking, oh, my head really is just about to blow out. I'm just there's just so much that's going on. TikTok, I'm thinking, that's for someone else to worry about. If I want TikTok, I'll talk to my daughter and she can set me up.
Absolutely. For me, it's just simple. It's good recipes. I like to. That's my Sunday cooking inspiration. So there we go.
Yeah. What was the last meal you cooked? What was the last really good meal you cooked? There you go. There's a final question for you.
Oh, okay. Well, I've actually started going down the whole French cuisine, and so I made this incredible bake with potatoes and chicken, and it was just amazing. Shallots. It was definitely not for those of us on a diet. It's definitely if you want to indulge in the carbs, in the fats, in the chickens, in everything. It was just beautiful.
Great. Okay, so I'm getting here that dinner this Sunday's at your place. Just let me know what time.
Absolutely. Just bring a bottle of wine and you're in the door.
Done. Well, Megan, I have to say this has been a great chat. I'm looking at the time and I'm very conscious, and I'm very thankful for you for putting so much into this. I think this is a really good place to leave it with French cuisine and the bottle of wine. I think that's fantastic. Megan Taylor, Head of Property Partnerships at Longview, thank you so very much for your time, and I look forward to catching up with you again very, very soon.
Thank you so much, Kirk. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You've been listening to another podcast in the Influential Conversations series. This series is proudly brought to you by Tappy, helping property managers deliver a world-class maintenance experience to their landlords and tenants, and providing a total property care solution. Inspection Express, the market leader in property inspection reporting and digital signature property documentation, giving you a seamless approach to the way that you manage properties. And Agent Dynamics, the Australian market-leading team development ecosystem to help you nurture, grow and retain your property teams since 2014. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tune in next time for the next in this series.